We're going to take a look at a couple of fixes for accidental yarn overs. So on this piece of knitting there was an accidental yarn over here and an accidental yarn over here. First of all, what is an accidental yarn over? It's simply just having the yarn on the wrong side of the needle before you go to work the next stitch and not noticing it at the time. This can happen particularly at the junctions between double-pointed needles when you're not familiar with them. Also when going from a knit to a purl, so if I didn't think to take my yarn between my needle and just brought it over the top by mistake, by the time I've purled that stitch, there's the accidental yarn over. And sometimes these happen and you just don't notice them till many rows later. Neither of the fixes I'm going to show you are perfect fixes, but they're good enough. And if this is one little hole in a pair of socks, the socks are not heirloom knitting, they'll be worn out in a year or two, and it's not important enough to go back 6 inches of knitting to make a perfect fix. Nobody but you will ever know that it was there in the first place. First of all, we're going to slip to directly above the hole. The problem with this accidental increase is the yarn over has given birth to a whole column of new stitches. This hole is about 5 rows back, and so if it were only 1 row back, I would drop the stitch, ladder it back and let go of the yarn over, and then I'd share the extra yarn out with the stitches on either side. And if that just happened once or twice, one would be for the yarn over, the next row would be the extra stitch, then no one would notice it. But because we're going back many rows, I would have to share the yarn out with 3 or 4 stitches on either side to hide it. And this would show over 5 or 6 rows. It just would end up being a very loose section of knitting. So I've dropped this back now to the original yarn over, and here it is. So for my first fix, I'm simply going to make that into a yarn over with a twist. So I've come into it from behind, twisted it round, and now I'm going to knit up the rungs of the ladder through the twisted yarn over. I'm going to change to a more appropriate sized crochet hook. And now I'm just going to rebuild that column. And when I bring my new stitch through, make sure I take all the slack on both sides, so give it a wiggle. Hook from front to back, twist the hook around a little, hook it through, and then give it a wiggle. Pop it back on the needle, and it's already considerably improved over what it was before. So that is the same now as a yarn over with a twist. Now for fix 2. Fix 1 was done whilst the knitting was still live, but if you'd failed to notice it until you'd actually cast off the project, then you're going to want to do something different again. Now what we're going to do is do a sewn fix. So I'm going to identify the 2 sides of the yarn over, so those 2 bits of yarn were actually the yarn over that caused the stitch to happen. And if I sew in behind those 2 stitch sides, I'm trying not to split the plies of the yarns behind it, and do a little pinch test. That cheers it up. Now I'm going to take that yarn tail into this stitch here, so I'm going to go down a bit lower. So this is sort of below and to the right. And I'm going into the side of the stitch and through to the back over that bar of yarn. So that's one. Then I'll take the other piece of yarn going to go into the same place that I took the first piece of yarn and feel around with my needle tip so that I can find that spot to go through to the back and darn it in. Now I've just happened to have hit a little fluffy spot in my replacement yarn, so I'm going to move that around. So that my replacement yarn is smooth. And there it is, pretty effectively fixed. No one would ever spot it, so you've got your two fixes. That's the drop back with the twist in the yarn over, which shows a little more. And this one, I've really turned it into a left slanting increase. It was as if we had been knitting along and suddenly did a left slanting increase there, but it hardly shows at all. Now on the private side, take the yarn tails and I would darn them in opposing directions on the diagonal to a fine. I've changed my darning needle to a much finer, slightly sharper needle, and now I'm going to take this yarn tail, just splitting the plies in a diagonal direction. And in a sock I might go a little further than that and then give it a little stretch before I trim it with a little tuft sticking out. And this one I think I'll go up here. You can always refer to the front of the work and see what it's looking like before you decide which direction to take the yarns. And there we go. And let's look at the front. Hardly noticeable at all. Both of them are a big improvement over the original appearance.